The crowd moved the way crowds always move when they know something bad is coming. They made space, not because they were polite, because they had learned, across years of living under Dravathi jurisdiction, that space was the only thing that kept you out of it. I was the thing they were making space for. My name is Kale Voss. I am an enforcement senior, grade 7, posted to the Verath 9 transit hub for 11 standard cycles. In that time, I had processed 42,000 docking violations, 19 species relation incidents, and one catastrophic cooling system failure that flooded the lower cargo bay with frozen condensate and gave me 2 weeks of paperwork I still had not entirely finished. None of that prepared me for Dock 7. The hub was loud the way it always was on rotation shift mornings. Cargo loaders dragging crates, customs bots chirping at anyone who moved wrong through a scan gate, the smell of engine coolant and something the Vethani vendors called food. 3 different languages running at the same time across the upper comm channels, none of them agreeing on anything. I moved through it the way I always moved, steady, even, not fast enough to suggest urgency, not slow enough to suggest hesitation. The walk of a man who does not need to rush because the situation will wait for him. It always had. Tier 4 species the briefing documents called humans, added to the Galactic Register 14 standard years ago, physically unremarkable, shorter than Dravathi, no exoskeletal structure, no natural defensive capability, warm-blooded, which always struck me as a strange design. Their file was 3 pages long. Most species got 30. 3 pages said everything that needed saying, apparently. The first time I saw her, she was standing at Customs Gate 11 with a cracked cargo scanner in one hand and a data pad in the other, arguing with a processing bot that had the patience of a stone wall and roughly the same conversational range. She was young, 22, 23 standard years by human reckoning. Her work uniform was gray, the kind of gray that starts as something else and loses the argument over time. There was a grease mark on the left collar. Her dark hair was pulled back badly, the kind of badly that meant she had done it in the dark or in a hurry or both. She was talking fast. That was the first thing I noticed. Not loud, not aggressive, fast. The words were coming out of her in a clean, direct stream, the way someone talks when they know exactly what they are saying and are frustrated that the thing they are saying it to cannot follow. The manifest code is flagged because the system updated overnight and the old format isn't compatible with the new scan protocol, she was saying. I filed a correction request at 0400. Reference number V7742-K. If you pull that reference number, the flag clears automatically. That's how it works. The bot processed this for 2 seconds. Cargo manifest violation detected, it said. Please step aside for secondary review. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment, one full breath, the kind of breath that means, I know how this ends and I am deciding whether I have the energy for it. Then she opened her eyes and tried again. I had seen that exact sequence in 8 species. The breath, the decision, the second attempt. It never worked with the bots. Bots did not negotiate. Neither did I. I crossed the floor toward her. The crowd shifted. 2 Vethani traders stepped back without looking, the way you step back from something you sense before you see it. A Korathi dock manager on my left found somewhere else to be. A human loader 3 gates down kept his eyes very carefully on his crate manifest and did not look up. Everyone knew the shape of what was about to happen. Everyone except her. She was still talking to the bot. I can show you the correction request on my pad, she said. Right here, reference number, filed hours ago. This is not a violation. The flag is a system error. Cargo manifest violation detected, the bot said again. I heard you the first time, she said. I stopped behind her. Step away from the gate, I said. She turned, not startled, just turned the way you turn when you hear your name called in a crowded room. She looked at me the way someone looks at a new piece of information they are sorting into the right category. I'm resolving a scan flag, she said. I have documentation. The gate is backed up, I said. Step away. It's backed up because the bot won't accept a correction request that's already in the system. If someone overrides the flag manually, it takes 4 seconds and the gate clears. She was not wrong. That was the irritating part. She was completely correct about the correction request process, the scan flag, and the 4 seconds. I had done that exact override 100 times. I was not going to do it now. Step away from the gate, I said again. Something moved in her face. Not fear, a recalibration. Like she was adding new information to a calculation she had been running, and the new number did not improve the result. I need this cargo cleared today, she said. I have a delivery window. If I miss it, I lose the contract. That is not my concern. It's my concern. I'm asking for 4 seconds. I looked at her for one long moment. Then I raised my hand and I struck her. Not with force meant to injure. The Dravathi enforcement strike is calibrated, a correction, the kind that ends arguments without escalating them. Firm, directional, across the left side of her face, open-handed, the way you stop a conversation that is no longer productive. She went down. The crowd did not gasp. A murmur ran through it, the low sound of people absorbing something unpleasant and moving it into the category of things they had already filed and would not examine again. 2 Vethani looked away. The Korathi dock manager was already gone. The bot continued processing. I was already reaching for my data pad to log the incident. Tier 4 individual, Gate 11, failure to comply, corrective action administered. Standard language, filed in under 30 seconds. I did not look at her again, which was why I did not see her get up. I heard it, a sound like a boot sole finding grip on a wet floor, a deliberate sound, purposeful. I turned. She was standing. Not slowly, not dramatically. She was simply standing, the way something stands when standing is the only option it has ever seriously considered. Her left hand was pressed to the side of her face. She was looking at her palm. There was a thin line of red across it from where her lip had caught the edge of her teeth on the way down. She looked at her hand. Then she looked at me. I have processed 211 enforcement incidents. I have looked into the eyes of species that tower over my own, species with chemical defenses, species that can communicate in frequencies that make your joints ache. I have seen fear in configurations I did not expect. I have cataloged fear across 11 species. That was not what was in her eyes. I did not have a word for what was in her eyes. I would spend a long time looking for one. The scanner. That was the first thing I thought about. My scanner was on the floor somewhere because when I went down, I must have dropped it, and the dock floor near Gate 11 was a grade 2 slope for drainage purposes. And if it had rolled toward the grate on the east side, then it was gone. The great gap was exactly the width of a standard dock scanner. I had noticed that 3 months ago when I dropped a stylus and watched it disappear and thought, I should report that grate, and then did not because who reports a grate? I should have reported the grate. My name is Mara. I work dock 7 through 11 on the Verath 9 transit hub, rotation shift mornings, have done for 2 years and 4 months. I grew up in a place called Pittsburgh, which is a city on Earth, which is a planet I have not seen since I was 19, and boarded a cargo hauler on a 3-year contract that became a different contract, and then a different one after that, the way things do when you are 19 and do not read the fine print carefully enough. I am not bitter about this. I am, however, very particular about my equipment. The scanner was a DS-40 with a custom grip wrap I had done myself using cargo tape and a rubber insulator strip, because the factory grip on DS-40s is designed for Vethani hand proportions and my hands are human proportions, and after 6 months my right palm had developed a callus in the wrong place. The custom grip had taken me an afternoon to do correctly. The scanner had cost 11 weeks of docking credit. The screen was cracked now. I could feel that even before I found it. I could feel the specific quality of a cracked screen the way you can feel a wrong note. There it was, east side. Not in the grate. stopped against a cargo anchor bolt 3 centimeters from the Great Gap. 3 centimeters. I picked it up. The screen was cracked across the lower left corner, a diagonal split, the kind that doesn't affect function immediately but works its way inward over time if you don't get it sealed. 30 credits to seal it. Maybe 40 if the dock repair tech was in a mood. I was cataloging this because my brain was doing what my brain does, which is find the immediate practical problem and measure it. It is not a defense mechanism. It is just how I think. There is always an immediate practical problem, and it always has a measurement, and the measurement tells you what you are dealing with. The immediate practical problem was a cracked scanner screen. The other thing, the larger thing, the thing that had put me on the floor, I was also measuring. I was measuring it the way you measure something large by walking its perimeter first, not standing in the middle of it. He was tall, 2 meters, maybe a little over. The Dravathi exoskeletal structure ran from shoulder to elbow along the outer arm, and I had felt it when I went down, felt the ridge of it, harder than bone in the way that materials designed for impact resistance are harder than bone. His reach was long. The strike had come from his right side, open hand, and the angle told me he had done it before, not in anger, in routine. That was the part I kept coming back to. Not the strike itself, the angle of it, the routine of it. He had done it before, and the crowd had made space before it happened, which meant the crowd had done this before too. They had all rehearsed their parts. Everyone knew their lines. Everyone had filed their response in the category of things that happen and moved on. I had not gotten the script. That was not entirely accurate. I had grown up in Pittsburgh. I knew something about what it looked like when someone used force as punctuation. I had felt it before, from people who looked like people, in places that were supposed to be safe. This was different in the way that a bad storm is different from a minor flood. Different scale, same wet. I stood up because the floor was filthy, and I had cleaned this uniform 2 days ago, and it was not yet dirty enough to justify the laundry cost of another wash cycle. And also because the floor was sloped for drainage, and the drainage water had a smell I did not want on my clothes. Those were the reasons. I am not sure what he expected me to do. I can tell you what every other person in that crowd was doing, which was looking at anything that was not the two of us. The Vethani traders near Gate 12 had developed a profound interest in their cargo manifest. The Korathi dock manager had ceased to exist entirely, as far as I could tell. 2 junior Dravathi officers near the far wall were looking at each other with the expressions of people who have just realized they are witnessing something that will require a report, and are not happy about it. He was reaching for his data pad. He was logging the incident. I watched him do it. He was not looking at me. He had already moved me into the filed category. Tier 4 individual corrective action administered, incident closed. I could see it in the way his stylus moved. Brisk, practiced, the handwriting of a man completing a sentence he has completed before. I looked at the side of his arm. The exoskeletal ridge ran from the shoulder joint down to the second elbow, which was a Dravathi anatomical feature, the double joint structure that gave them their reach advantage. It was impressive engineering. I had read about it in the xenobiology handouts they gave new hub workers, 3 pages of anatomy diagrams with labels in 4 languages. I had read mine twice because I like to know the geometry of things. The ridge was the strength of the arm. It was also the direction of its weakness. If the ridge was load-bearing from above, then load from below, from the inside angle at the second joint. I am a dock worker. I move cargo. I know leverage. I hit him. Not with anger. I want to be precise about this because it matters. I was not enraged. I was not brave. I was running a calculation, and the calculation had an answer, and I applied the answer with the same focus I use when I am seating a cargo lock that does not want to seat. I hit him at the inside angle of the second joint with the heel of my right hand, the hard part, the part I have built up from 2 years of cargo work, and I pushed the load-bearing structure sideways, which was the direction it was not designed to take load from. His arm went wrong. When an arm goes wrong, the rest of the body makes decisions it would not otherwise make. His weight redistributed. His primary stance joint, the wide-set hip structure that Dravathi use as their base, tried to compensate and could not compensate fast enough. 1 second, the weight was wrong. 2 seconds, he was already committed to a direction he did not choose. 3 seconds, gravity, which had never once in the history of the universe made an exception for anyone's rank or filing status, made its position clear. 4 seconds, the floor introduced itself. He was large, so the introduction was loud, the kind of loud that stops a doc, that stops calm chatter, that stops the customs bot's mid-chirp, which I had not known was possible. The doc was very quiet. I stood there with my cracked scanner. He was on the floor. His writing process, the Dravathi muscle sequence for recovering from a prone position, required 40 seconds. I knew this from the xenobiology handout. Page 2, lower section. Recovery time from ground position, unassisted, 35 to 45 standard seconds. I waited. He did not tell me to wait. I just did, because I had nowhere to be for the next 40 seconds and the cargo bot still had my manifest flagged, and I was going to need someone to override that flag manually, and right now, he was the senior officer on the floor, in both senses. The crowd did not move. I took a photo of my cracked scanner screen. The crack was 4 centimeters diagonal, 35 credits to seal, I decided. The repair tech was usually in a fine mood on rotation mornings. He finished writing himself at 38 seconds. I noted that because I had counted. He looked at me. I looked at him. I still need the gate flag cleared, I said. The 2 junior officers near the far wall made a sound that was not quite anything. He looked at me for a very long time. I could not tell what he was thinking. I am not good at reading Dravathi expressions. The exoskeletal face structure limits the range of movement that humans use to signal emotion, and I had not been on the hub long enough to learn the other signals. But I had grown up in Pittsburgh. I knew what it looked like when a large thing was recalibrating. 38 seconds. I had been on the floor for 38 seconds. In 11 cycles of enforcement work, I had never been on the floor. Not once. Not during the Korathi freight dispute of Cycle 6, which had involved 4 very large beings and 1 very small corridor. Not during the Vethani customs protest of Cycle 9, which had turned loud and crowded and physical in the way protests sometimes do when they have been patient for long enough. Not during the cooling system failure, when the entire lower deck had flooded, and everyone on it had lost their footing except me because I had wide-stance training and grip boots and the presence of mind to grab a support column. 38 seconds on the floor of Dock 7, Gate 11, witnessed by approximately 40 beings of 6 different species. And 1 human. She was still standing there when I finished the writing sequence. I had expected her to run. Every species I had ever applied a corrective action to had either already run or was in the process of running. It was the predictable response. It was the correct response from a survival calculation standpoint. The corrective action was a communication. This conversation is finished, and the next communication will be larger. Every Tier 4 species I had encountered understood this intuitively. She was looking at her scanner. She had taken a photograph of it while I was on the floor. She had taken a photograph of the cracked screen. For the insurance claim, she said, unprompted. She said it the way you report a weather observation, factual, direct, mildly inconvenient. I did not have a response for this. Station security arrived at the 2-minute mark, which was fast. Dock 7 had a direct comm line to the security station because it processed the highest cargo volume on the hub, and high cargo volume attracted the kinds of problems that needed fast response. I had written that policy myself in Cycle 3. 2 officers, both Dravathi, Grade 3 enforcement, junior posting. Young enough that their exoskeletal structure still had the lighter coloring of incomplete development. They looked at me. They looked at her. They looked at the 40 witnesses, who were all very busy with their cargo manifests. The senior of the two, an officer named Vethroa, had been under my command for 8 months. He was methodical, good instincts. He would be grade 5 within 3 cycles if he kept his incident reports clean. He looked at me on the ground and then at the human girl, and then back at me and his face. Did the thing Dravathi faces do when they are running a calculation they did not expect to run. Then very quietly, he adjusted his weapon setting. I saw him do it. The selector dial on a Dravathi enforcement sidearm has 3 positions: active corrective, passive corrective, and standby. He moved it from active to passive, one small movement. He did not look at the human girl while he did it. He looked at his data pad as if he were consulting it. She did not notice. I noticed. I would think about that later. The fact that Vethroa, 8 months into his posting, had made that decision in under 10 seconds. I had not told him to make it. His training had not told him to make it. He had looked at the situation and made it on his own. That was either very good instincts or a very troubling precedent. I was not sure which. The filing took 90 minutes. Species relation incident involving a Tier 4 individual and a Grade 7 enforcement senior. There were forms I had never filled out before, forms that lived in a subdirectory of the incident management system I had not opened in 11 cycles because I had never needed them. Vethroa found them and sent them to my data pad without commenting on the fact that he had needed to find them. While I was filing, the human girl was also filing. I could see her across the dock bay, sitting on a cargo crate with her data pad and her cracked scanner, entering information with the steady, unhurried pace of someone completing a task that needs completing. Her advocate arrived at the 4-minute mark. A Vethani, public sector assignment by the look of the filing badge on his collar. He was older, gray-toned in the Vethani way, with the slightly rumpled quality of a being who had been doing this work for a long time and had stopped being surprised by most of it. He sat beside her on the cargo crate. She showed him something on her data pad. He read it for 30 seconds and then he tilted his head in the Vethani gesture that means, interesting. Not concerning, not alarming, interesting. He glanced at me. I looked back at my forms. There is a xenobiology file on humans. Every enforcement officer at Tier 4 posting has it in their reference system. 3 pages. I had read it once when I first arrived on the hub and had not returned to it because 3 pages does not take long and I had found nothing that required follow-up. I pulled it up now. Page 1, Physiological Overview, Warm-blooded, Average height range, Unremarkable sensory range, Skeletal structure without external reinforcement, Significant note, Pain threshold higher than Dravathi average, Mechanism unclear. I had not noted that line on first reading. Pain threshold higher than Dravathi average, Mechanism unclear. I read it again. Page 2, Behavioral Assessment, Social organization flexible and context-dependent, Communication style direct, notable for persistence in goal-directed behavior, Aggression threshold assessed as low. Aggression threshold assessed as low. I thought about 38 seconds. I thought about the inside angle of the second joint, and the very specific and deliberate application of load from a direction that structure was not designed to manage. Low aggression threshold. Someone had written that. A researcher, an assessor, someone who had looked at humans from a distance and measured what they saw and written 3 pages and filed them and considered the matter complete. That researcher had not been on the floor. Page 3, Integration Notes. Humans adapt to multi-species environments with above-average speed, demonstrate high tolerance for adverse conditions, recommend standard Tier 4 processing protocols. Standard Tier 4 processing protocols. I set the data pad down. The dock had resumed its noise. Cargo loaders, customs bots, 3 overlapping comm channels. The crowd had redistributed itself back into the ordinary patterns of a busy morning. The Vethani traders were at their gate. The Korathi dock manager had reappeared somewhere near Gate 9. Everything had settled back into the shape of a normal day, except that I had a stack of forms I had never filed before, and a human girl sitting on a cargo crate with a cracked scanner, and a Vethani advocate who had called the situation interesting. And the phrase, pain threshold higher than Dravathi average, mechanism unclear. I thought about the way she had stood up. Not dramatically, not as a statement, just stood up, the simple physical act of returning to vertical, as if the floor were a position she had visited briefly and found unsatisfactory. There was a word for it in Vethani, Suraketh. I had encountered it in a cultural briefing document years ago and filed it as an interesting linguistic note. It described the quality of a thing that returns to its original position after being displaced. Springback, loosely. The word used for water finding its level, or a branch after the wind. The Vethani used it for humans specifically, I now remembered. A footnote. I had not thought about why. I opened a new incident form. In the field marked behavioral notes I wrote, standard assessment may be incomplete. Then I looked at it for a moment. Then I added, recommend review. Then I closed the file and went to find the forms I needed to file, which were in a subdirectory I had never opened, because in 11 cycles of enforcement work on this hub, I had never needed them. I found them. They were very long. The tribunal room was on level 4 of the administrative block, which was the part of the hub that no one visited unless they were in some kind of trouble. The air recyclers up there worked better than on the dock levels. The lighting was brighter. The floors were a different material, something smooth and dark that reflected light and did not smell like coolant. I noticed the floor was cleaner than Dock 7. Small win. My name is Mara and I had been in rooms like this before, not interstellar ones, just regular ones back on Earth, back in Pittsburgh, the kind with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs and someone behind a desk who had more forms than patients. The geometry was different here. The ceiling was higher. The seating arrangements were tiered, with the Dravathi tribunal panel elevated on a curved platform at the front, 3 officers in formal-grade uniforms behind a long bench, and the opposing parties positioned at floor level. The effect was that everyone looking at the tribunal looked up, and the tribunal looking at you looked down. I assumed this was not an accident. Os had briefed me on the walk over. His full name was something longer and Vethani in ways my pronunciation was not equipped for, so he went by Os for beings who could not manage it. He had taken my case on 48 hours after the incident at Gate 11. He had shown up at my dock locker with a data pad and a cup of something warm, and told me I had a case, and he wanted to run it. I had asked him why. He had said, because it's interesting. He was the kind of person who used that word the way other people use the word good, as a measure of value. I had decided within 20 minutes of meeting him that he was extremely good at his job. He was also very old in the Vethani way, which meant the gray tone of his skin had deepened to something close to silver, and the lines around his eyes had layered into something that looked like a map of everywhere he had been. He moved slowly. He spoke slowly. He was the least alarmed person I had ever stood next to in a difficult situation, and I grew up around people who had refined not being alarmed into a survival skill. They will present first, he told me on the walk over. Let them finish. Do not react. Do not look at the panel when they are speaking. Look at the middle distance, the way you are thinking about something specific and unrelated. What should I think about? Whatever you like. I find cargo manifests useful, very specific, very dull, keeps the face still. I thought about my correction request. Reference number V7742-K still in the system. Still unfiled, presumably, because the bot had never cleared the flag. The Dravathi advocate was a grade 9 enforcement legal officer, named something I could not pronounce. He was tall, even by Dravathi standards, with the dark exoskeletal coloring of an older officer. He presented with the smooth speed of someone who had given this specific presentation before, maybe not this case, but this shape of case. Tier 4 individual physical contact with enforcement officer, clear breach of accord provisions. He listed the recommended sanctions. Labor reclassification. That meant reassignment to a lower grade work category, docking license revoked, species demerits filed. I knew what species demerits meant. It meant my incident would go into the human file, the 3-page file. It would add a data point, and the data point would say, Tier 4 individual initiated physical contact with enforcement officer. And every enforcement officer on every hub and station that used that file would read it and adjust their assessment of every human they encountered. I looked at the middle distance. I thought about the cargo manifest. Reference number V7742-K. The flag was a system error from an overnight protocol update. The correction request was in the system. It had been in the system since 0400. 4 seconds of manual override and the gate would have cleared. 4 seconds. Os rose when the Dravathi advocate finished. He was shorter than everyone else in the room, which did not appear to bother him. He adjusted his data pad. He looked at the panel with the specific, calm attention of a being who has waited a long time for this particular moment. I would like to cite Accord 7, Section 3, he said. The tribunal room had an acoustic design that made silence very thorough. This silence was the kind that had weight. The head arbitrator was a Dravathi female, grade 11, with the kind of face that has processed a very large number of cases and has made peace with the fact that people are, on the whole, a disappointment. Her name was Arithven. I had looked her up. 30 years on the tribunal panel, 740 cases. She had never in those 740 cases heard Accord 7, Section 3 cited. Nobody had, not in 40 years. Os explained calmly what Section 3 said. It said that enforcement physical contact required prior verbal warning, documented in the officer's incident log, to be noted in real time, not filed retroactively, before corrective action was administered. It said this requirement was non-negotiable across all species designations, including Tier 4 classifications. It said that failure to provide documented prior warning rendered the corrective action non-compliant. It said non-compliant corrective action against a citizen in the process of resolving a legitimate documentation dispute could not be treated as a provocation for any counter-response by that citizen. In plain language, he had hit me without warning. Section 3 said he had to warn me first. He had not, which meant I had not provoked the incident, which meant I had responded to a non-compliant action. The room was very quiet for a long time. The Dravathi advocate said something about established practice, about the precedent of 40 years, about the operational realities of high-traffic enforcement environments. Os listened politely. Then he said that established practice did not supersede a written accord provision, and that precedent, in the case of a provision that had not been tested, was not precedent at all but simply habit. He said it the way you say something that is obvious, not aggressively, just clearly. Arithven called a recess. Os and I sat in a corridor on a bench made of some gray material that was not quite comfortable, which I assumed was a design choice. He read his data pad. I counted the ceiling panels. There were 41. The 41st was a slightly different shade than the others, which meant it had been replaced at some point. What happens in the recess? I asked. They read Section 3, Os said, and then they have a conversation about what it means to have not read Section 3 for 40 years. Is that conversation going in our favor? It is going in the direction of accuracy, Os said, which tends to be in everyone's favor eventually. When we went back in, Arithven looked at me for a long moment. You were aware of your right to document non-compliant enforcement contact, she said. It was not quite a question. I was not at the time, I said. But you responded physically to non-compliant contact. I responded to being on the floor, I said. I needed to not be on the floor. The floor near Gate 11 slopes toward the drainage grate. Arithven looked at me. The drainage grate, she said. The gap on the east grate is exactly the width of a standard dock scanner, I said. My scanner was near it. I needed to recover my equipment. The two junior panel members looked at each other. Arithvin was quiet for a moment. "Were you aware," she said carefully, "that you were in contact with a grade 7 enforcement senior?" "Yes," I said. "I'd seen his grade badge." "And you understood the implications of that contact?" I thought about this honestly. I understood that the floor was a drainage slope, and my scanner was near the grate and I needed to stand up, I said. Those were the things I understood at the time. Nothing else. I understood that the gate flag needed clearing, I said. Reference number V7742-K. It's still in the system. I filed the correction request at 0400. It takes 4 seconds to manually clear. Arithvin looked at me for a very long time. Then she looked at the Dravathi advocate. He was looking at his data pad, as if it had recently said something that required very careful rereading. "Why did you not leave the premises after the initial contact?" Arithvin said. I considered the question. I gave it the same honest attention I would give a calculation. "Where would I go?" I said. The room was quiet again. Os beside me made a very small sound. Not a word, just a sound. The kind of sound that means, yes, exactly that. Arithvin called a second recess. We went back to the bench in the corridor. Os read his data pad. I counted the ceiling panels again, still 41. The replacement panel was still a slightly different shade. "You know what did it?" Os said, not looking up from his data pad. "The citation," I said. "No," he said. "The citation gave them a legal mechanism. What did it was the question." "Which question?" "Where would you go?" he said. I thought about that. "I wasn't being dramatic," I said. "I genuinely didn't know where I was supposed to go." "I know," Os said. "That's what did it." He turned a page on his data pad. "In my experience," he said, "beings who run understand that they have lost something. They are calculating the cost of the loss and deciding the loss is acceptable. Beings who do not run have not made that calculation, not because they are brave, because the premise of the calculation is not available to them." He glanced at me over his data pad. "You genuinely could not imagine losing," he said. "Not as a strategy, just as a fact. It was not a realistic outcome for you." I thought about V7742-K, about the correction request, about the delivery window and the contract, and the 11 weeks of credit in the DS-40 with the custom grip. "I had a cargo manifest to clear," I said. "Yes," I said. "That's the part they won't know how to file." He went back to his data pad. The recess lasted 22 minutes. When we went back in, Arithvin looked at both parties for a long moment. Then she ruled. Partial settlement, equipment damages, documentation of non-compliant contact in the officer's record, gate flag cleared retroactively, reference number acknowledged. No species demerits filed. I walked back to Dock 7 with Os in the clean air of the administrative corridor, and then through the sliding doors into the dock-level air, which immediately smelled like coolant and something the Vethani vendors called food. It smelled like a normal morning. "Thank you," I told Os. "Interesting case," he said, which was the highest compliment he appeared to give anything. He went back to wherever Vethani public advocates went when they were not in corridors on slightly uncomfortable benches, and I went to the dock repair tech, who was in a fine mood, and had my scanner screen sealed for 30 credits, and then I went back to work. The reassignment order came through 6 days after the tribunal. I did not request it. Someone above my grade made the decision, and the decision moved through 3 levels of administrative processing before it reached my data pad as a completed directive rather than a consultation. Grade 7 enforcement seniors do not get consulted on their own reassignment. I knew this. I had written 2 of those reassignments myself. My name is Kale Voss, and I was being sent to Dock Sector 14, which was the human-majority docking zone on the outer ring of Verath 9. It had been human majority for 9 years, since the expansion contracts brought a second wave of human workers to the hub. It had its own cargo lanes, its own customs gate configuration, its own comm channel set, and its own very specific set of problems that the standard enforcement protocols were apparently not managing adequately. I knew it was a demotion in the language that does not use the word demotion. I was not grade 7 in Sector 14. I was grade 7 in a posting that was being used as a consequence. I read the transfer directive twice. Then I pulled the human xenobiology file. 3 pages. I had last opened it on the day of the incident, sitting in the dock bay with the form stack and the 40 witnesses who had all found somewhere else to look. I had written standard assessment may be incomplete in a behavioral notes field, and then closed the file. I opened it now and read it from the beginning. Page 1, Physiological Overview. Pain threshold higher than Dravathi average, mechanism unclear. I had looked up the mechanism since the incident. It was not unclear in the current literature. The file had simply not been updated. The mechanism was a combination of neurological pain processing speed and an autonomic response system that, under certain conditions, effectively deprioritized pain signals in favor of goal-directed motor function. Not an absence of pain, a filing of it. Put it here, deal with it later. The current task is not finished. Someone had known this when they updated the literature. No one had updated the file. Page 2, Behavioral Assessment, notable for persistence in goal-directed behavior. I had a new appreciation for that line. Page 3, Integration Notes, high tolerance for adverse conditions. I read that 3 times. Then I opened a new document, not a form, not an incident report, a note, personal, for my own reference file, the one I maintained separately from the official system, the one where I kept observations that did not fit neatly into standard categories. I wrote standard assessment may be incomplete. Then I wrote see incident gate 11 cycle current. Then I wrote revise pain threshold assessment. Then I wrote revise physical capability assessment. Then I stopped. The third line of the file, notable for persistence in goal-directed behavior. I looked at that line. I left it. Then I closed the document and began packing for Sector 14. Sector 14 was loud in a different way from the main hub. The comm chatter ran faster. The cargo loader teams worked in overlapping shifts with very little transition time, which meant the handoffs were loud and quick, and full of the specific shorthand that develops between people who do the same work together for long enough. The customs bots were the same model as the rest of the hub, but they had been customized, I noticed, with modified response protocols that accepted the human filing formats the standard version rejected. Someone had done that. Someone had filed a request and navigated the administrative process and gotten the bots updated. A small change, practical, invisible to anyone who had not needed it. I noted it. I had been in Sector 14 for 4 days when I saw her again. She was at Gate 16, which was the internal cargo gate for the East Ring storage units, running what looked like an inventory scan on a stack of freight containers. She had the DS-40 with her, the one with the custom grip tape and the sealed crack screen. I could see the seal line from 12 meters. She did not see me. I stood at the edge of the gate zone and watched her work for a moment. She moved through the freight stack with a systematic efficiency that was recognizable across species, the pattern of someone who has done this many times and has organized their motion to eliminate waste. Scan, check, move. Scan, check, move. No hesitation, no backtracking. On her third pass, she looked up and saw me. We looked at each other for 2 seconds. Then she went back to her scan. I walked over. I did not know what I intended to do. I had not planned this. I had simply seen her and walked toward her the way you walk towards something you have been thinking about and have not yet finished thinking about. Sector 14 is your new posting, she said, without looking up from the scanner. Yes, I said. She completed a scan, checked the readout, made a note on her pad. How long? Indefinite, I said. She nodded, not sympathetically, just information received. I stood there for a moment. The file on humans, I said. The Xenobiology Assessment, the Standard Issue 1. She looked up. I've read it, she said. The pain threshold notation says the mechanism is unclear. It does. The mechanism is not unclear, I said. The literature was updated 6 years ago. The file was not. She looked at me with the expression I was beginning to understand was her default for processing new information. Level direct, no performance of reaction. Someone should update the file, she said. Yes, I said. She went back to her scan. I stood there for another moment. I am going to be running enforcement in this sector, I said. If there are gate flag issues, correction request processing delays, documentation problems of the type that occurred at Gate 11. V7742-K, she said. That type, I said. You can bring them to my attention directly. She stopped scanning. She looked at me with her full attention, which was a different thing from the partial attention she had been giving me while she worked. Full attention, for her, was very still and very direct, the way a beam of light is focused when it is not being dispersed. Directly, she said. Yes. Before any corrective action is considered. Yes. She looked at me for a moment longer. That's the way the process is supposed to work, she said. Yes, I said, it is. She went back to her scan. I turned to walk back toward the gate station. Kale Voss, she said. I stopped. The grate on the east side of Gate 11, she said. The gap is exactly the width of a standard dock scanner. Someone should report it. I stood there. I will file the report, I said. I walked back to the gate station. I filed the grate report first. Then I opened my personal reference file and added 3 lines. The first line said, Pain threshold mechanism, confirmed, not unclear, file requires update, submitted correction request to Xenobiology Records Division. The second line said, Physical capability assessment, significantly underestimated, methodology of original assessment unknown, recommend field observation as supplement to document-based rating. The third line said, Notable for persistence in goal-directed behavior, accurate. Do not revise. The third line is the one that matters. Then I opened a new section of the file that I had not had before. I titled it, Operational Notes, Sector 14, and I began to write. Not forms, not incident reports, observations. The way the cargo teams organized their handoffs. The way the bots had been modified, and who had filed the modification request, and how long the request had taken to process. The way the workers in Sector 14 had built an entire informal communication system parallel to the official comm channels, faster and more accurate, because the official channels had too much latency for the pace they worked at. The way Mara had known, to the standard second, exactly how long the writing sequence would take. She had counted. She had the Xenobiology handout. She had read page 2, the recovery time section, and she had counted. I wrote that down. Then I wrote, Standard Tier 4 processing protocols assume a species that responds to adverse conditions by minimizing further contact with the source of the adverse conditions. I paused. Then I wrote, This assumption is incorrect for humans. Humans respond to adverse conditions by gathering information about them. Then they read the handout. They count the seconds. They learn the geometry of the joint. Then, we have no protocol for a species that studies the enforcement system, while the enforcement system is being applied to them. I looked at that sentence for a long time. Then I wrote, Recommend we develop one. Then recommend we do it fast. Outside the gate station window, Sector 14 continued its morning. Cargo loaders on overlapping shifts. Calm chatter in the fast shorthand of people who had worked together long enough. Customs bots with their modified protocols, accepting formats the standard version would have rejected. At Gate 16, A dock worker with a custom grip scanner was completing her inventory run. Scan, check, move. The pattern of someone who has organized their motion to eliminate waste. Systematic, efficient, thorough. She finished the last container in the stack, made her final notation, looked at the gate readout until it confirmed the inventory complete. Then she picked up her scanner and walked to the next gate, and I watched her go. And then I went back to my notes, because there was still a great deal I did not yet understand, and I intended to understand it. The file on humans was 3 pages. I thought it was going to need more room than that. And